There's a lot of different kinds of mistakes people make at the sesh. I actually want you to leave a comment. Let me know the biggest mistake you've ever made at the sesh. Something you'll probably never do again because it's haunting you to this day. But the other day we talked about 5 noob mistakes and I said I was going to expand on it. So today we've got 5 more noob mistakes that stoners make. Now we all know the biggest mistake is not following my Twitch. Come on, bro. There's a sesh at 9 p.m. Eastern tonight. Where are you at? But for this list, I got some things for people who mostly use papers and people who mostly use glass pieces. That way we got everybody covered. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, I only use carts, well, that's your mistake. But the first mistake on the list is something, it's not super common, but when it happens, it's hilarious and it sucks at the same time, but coughing into the piece. Now, if you've ever coughed into the piece, bruh, it can be funnier depending on which piece you have. If you got like a big old water pipe, somebody's mid-hit and they just rip a cough right into that and you see the water shoot out the other end, you got a nice little cloud of ash that busts out, or maybe a hot cherry even, you're spitting a little bit of fire. It can be wild, but just seeing the water come up and push through the bowl or push through the joint, kind of funny, but also you got to do a little bit of cleanup to get your next hit going. Now, this can usually happen when somebody's not ready for all the smoke that's coming through, or when they're not properly hydrated. They definitely didn't sip before they ripped. Making sure you're really hydrated and making sure you take a few deep breaths before that hit can help you prepare for a bigger rip and might lower your chances of accidentally coughing into it. Also, just be careful. You feel the cough coming on, pull the piece away. Now, number 2 on the list is kind of the opposite of the next one. This one happens when you're nice and hydrated. Maybe you sipped before you rip, but drooling into the piece. When you start pulling a bunch of smoke through, your body's natural reaction is like, yo, let's send some saliva to combat this. And sometimes that can cause you to build up like a big old mouth full of drool. And if you use like any straight tube piece where you got it sitting on the desk and you got to lean over it, that's drool city. Like, that is going to cause the drool to waterfall out of your mouth. That's why I like beakers. Anything where I could sit upright and tilt it back towards me. Even if my mouth starts to salivate a little bit more, I got a lot of spit floating around, I got my head upright, it's not just gonna fall out due to gravity. When you lean over your piece, bro, drool city. This can happen when you're not being careful. It happens when you're nice and hydrated. It happens when you're ready for the smoke. But just being conscious of the drool in your mouth can help you prevent this. You might need to cut your hit short just to handle the situation. Please, 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 whatever you do, don't drool into somebody's piece. And if you do, offer to clean it on the spot because, bruh, you just drooled into my piece. Number 3, this one's kind of funny to roll into because it involves drool, but if you're passing a joint around, a blunt around, anything with paper, and you're handing somebody something with a wet tip because you slobbered on it a little bit, bro, what are you doing? What's a fun name you got for a wet joint tip? Because I've heard somebody call them ducktails before, or duck butts because they're always in the water. Soggy tips. I've heard some funny names for them, but I don't really like joints. I don't like to sit in a circle and pass around one piece of paper. But if you're not careful or conscious of what you're doing and you're putting your mouth right on the paper and you get it wet, like, the people in your circle are grossed out by you. This is why I like glass tips. This is why I like joint stones. If you've ever used one of those, nice little rock or a stone with a hole cut through it. That way you have something to hold in between the paper and your mouth. So if there's any moisture, it's not going to get right into the paper and absorbed. You could wipe it off of other surfaces. I don't really do a lot of joints, and probably the next joint I smoke will be all by myself. I'm not passing it, so that's one way to do it. Maybe just roll a smaller one for everybody. You don't got to worry about drool. But be conscious of your saliva. Number 4 on the list is another one involving papers, but not ashing or letting the cherry fall out can be a big bummer for some people. Handing a joint around, if you didn't ash it, some of the first sessions I got in, I used to have people yell at me like, bro, you didn't ash it before you handed it to me. And it kind of ingrained it into me, which it's like a good habit to have ash before you pass it, especially if you got like an inch of ash hanging off. It does really suck when somebody hands you a joint they didn't ash, and before you can even go to inhale it, a big old clump of ash falls off and it lands on your leg. It's like, thanks, bro. But also letting the cherry fall. Now, that probably happens if the joint is poorly rolled or if you're handling it wrong. But some people are willy-nilly. They're wild with the papers. They tap the ash too hard. I've seen people do some wild stuff like they're trying to get the cherry to fall out. Just be careful. That thing's hot. Now, before we say number 5, I want you to know, if you have Amazon Prime, you can give me Jeff Bezos money. All you got to do is link your Amazon Prime to a Twitch account and subscribe to my Twitch. It's free if you have Amazon Prime. But the last one on the list involves papers or glass pieces, and this is something that I would recommend everybody avoid, but mixing tobacco with your flour. Now, I do know in some countries it's pretty common to do. They don't even have a lot of access to flour, and really the only way that you can do it is mixing tobacco. But there's a lot of new stoners out there who are just getting into it. They're not quite sure what they want to do. They hear about blunts, they hear about chops, and then they just start smoking and they add a little bit of tobacco into it. Now, that can just make your whole experience grosser overall, nastier overall, but it can also add this weird element of addiction where not like you're fiending for your next smoke session, you're fiending for your next blunt. I've talked to a ton of people that have heard me talk bad about blunts, and they're like, bro, I switched to a glass bong. I'm getting way higher. I'm going through way less flour, and I don't feel like nasty all the time. If you smoke a lot of blunts, you go through a lot of stuff. Your throat just gets wrecked by all the combusted paper, all the extra flour you're going through. Like, really, glass pieces are way more efficient, and you just need less flour. And you would rather smoke less and get higher. Trust me, you would rather smoke less and get higher. It just smoking is harsh. It wears you down. It can wreck your throat over time. Either way, smoke sessions at 9 p.m. Eastern on Twitch. I'll see you there. Have a lit day, my dudes.